Welcome to the chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 162 of Chalk Talk. I'm your host, Shane Haff, and you can follow me on Twitter and YouTube at Shane Haff NFL. I'm joined today by the best co-host in the game. You've heard him on the Tough Cover radio show. It is Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at Mark Henry Jr. _ Mark, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well. I said this before. I'm back into the video game world, and this expansion draft is begging for me to buy a mediocre Madden 25 game this year and input this team into Madden.
You know, the thing is, if you're going to do that and you're big into NCAA football, you just need to get like the deluxe edition, and you basically get them both for the same price, and you get early access. So I'm totally out on Madden, so I'm not doing that. And I'm unfortunately going to be traveling the week that NCAA comes out. But I put a post on Twitter earlier this week of like the top teams I'm considering for dynasties and road to glories. So I'm very much in the college football 25 headspace. But unfortunately, it's not out yet. So we've got to keep playing make-believe here in the NFL. And what we're doing today is concluding a 3-part series. We are drafting the 33rd NFL team. And so if you followed along with the series, 2 episodes ago, we went through the NFC and we established 4 protected players on offense and 4 protected players on defense. And then the next week we did the same thing with the AFC. And the only rule we really had is that each team had to protect their first selection in the draft this season. So that's where we're at. We have the protected players. If you want to go back and listen to that process, maybe you missed that over the last couple of weeks. There you go. That's what we're doing. But today we are drafting this roster. And so we've set it up to have 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, 4 receivers, 2 tight ends, a full offensive line with 1 backup. And then on defense, we'll do 2 edge rushers, 2 D tackles, 3 linebackers, 3 corners, 2 safeties, a flex defensive back, a flex defensive lineman, and then a kicker and a punter. So that's 32 positions, 1 player from each team. Mark and I have each done this exercise independently just to get an idea of where we're going to go. But this is interesting because as soon as we disagree on a player, the dominoes start to fall. And so we're going to see if we can reason this out on air. So Mark, let's dive into it here. The best way I can think to do this is just to throw out a team and the player that you would take from that team. And so I think that's probably the place to start. So who is one of the ones that you think was the easiest selection? You're muted.
It's pretty easy when you have a first ballot Hall of Famer who is arguably the best player in the history of his position. And we argued a bit when we were talking about who to keep from the Chiefs. But I think Travis Kelce is the face of the franchise. So he's bringing Taylor Swift to some away games. I don't know if we can get Taylor Swift to come to Oklahoma City for any home games, but it'll be all right. Travis Kelce slots in pretty well there at tight end.
Yeah, I'm with you. That's where I ended up on my roster. You go get a 34-year-old, and maybe that's concerning, but if you're an expansion team, you're trying to capture a fan base, and obviously the Swifties would be a great way to do that. Travis Kelce would be a great face of a franchise for a few years. And so I'm with you on that. We'll go Travis Kelce as our first tight end. Where should we go from there?
We could stay in the division. We could stay in the AFC West, and not a lot of quarterbacks available. A quarterback who I think Shane and I have kind of always been maybe a little higher on than consensus maybe. I think he's pretty solidly a top 32 NFL quarterback at least, and it's Gardner Minshew. So you take him from the Raiders, and I actually feel pretty good about Minshew being our starting quarterback. I'd have to look back at the last couple of years, but I feel better about our quarterback position than I usually do in this exercise.
Yeah, I am with you. Gardner Minshew is the guy that I picked here. There's some other options from the Raiders. I mean, you've got Jackson Powers-Johnson, who's the rookie center that we both really liked. But as we discovered going through the protected players, there's some really good offensive linemen that are still available. And so when you're looking at quarterback, and most teams protected their starting quarterback, this is the one team that didn't, because we were in that there's 1 of 2 teams that didn't. We also
there's a couple, yeah.
Yeah. But this one, it was like, okay, you've got Aiden O'Connell, you've got Gardner Minshew. They can only take one. You probably don't waste a protection. And I would definitely take Minshew out of that group. And so I think that one is pretty easy as well. Mark, I'm going to throw you another easy one. Let's go in the same division. AFC West fans, we're going to knock your division out early. Let's go to the Chargers. And I've got Khalil Mack as one of our edge rushers. I mean,
yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, what he did last year, and granted, he's an older player. He's 33 years old, but what he did last year in his age 32 season, I mean, he had 17 sacks. Now, it was his first double-digit sack season in 4 years, sure, but I really think Khalil Mack is a steal in this draft. The Chargers were in one of those situations where they're in cap purgatory, and they didn't leave this guy. They didn't protect this guy. So we'll go Khalil Mack as an edge rusher. And we've got 3 of the 4 teams of the AFC West already spoken for.
Yeah, I'm pretty concerned about pass rushing on this team. I think it might end up being our maybe our weakest point of the team, unless you're really concerned about Minshew and just passing. But I think our receivers will be pretty good, and Kelsey's pretty good. So I think, I'm all in on Khalil Mack, and I think that there's a guy that's going to come up that maybe we end up getting into a little bit of a debate over, because I'm worried about the pass rushing. So that's a little tease. But I'm going to go away from the AFC West, because I think Denver's a little bit of a wild card. You could go a couple different ways. The player I had in for Denver isn't necessarily a great player. It's kind of just where it's slotted and where it made sense. So I'm going to skip back. I'm going to go to the NFC East, all the way to the other end of things, all the way from the AFC West to the NFC East. And I'll tell you what, one of the teams that has the least amount of options is the New York Giants. You could look at if you wanted like a slot type receiver, you have some options there with Wan'Dale Robinson and some other guys like that. You could go with like a Deontay Banks, who wasn't necessarily good last year, but he's a young corner. But Bobby Okereke is at least a very solid linebacker, definitely solidly above average, which is more than you could say for most players in the Giants. So Bobby Okereke, I think, makes a lot of sense at linebacker.
Okay, I am fully on board with that. I'm having a bit of a technical difficulty here, so I'm going to get that one typed in a second. Yeah. But I fully agree with you on Bobby Okereke. Go ahead and talk to me about the next position that you think you might want to go while I figure this out here.
Yeah, we'll stick right there at linebacker. I'll stick at linebacker. I'm going to a different division here, but it's a team that has interesting options. And Pat Freiermuth's an interesting option. Isaac Seumalo, former Eagle, interesting option. And the most interesting option that I didn't end up going with, and one that Shane and I talked about off air, is you could argue with an expansion team, you'd want to raise the floor. Nothing raises the floor like a mobile quarterback who can run and create that offense on his own. So Justin Fields was definitely someone I considered here. And if we got Fields, I would have started him above Minshew. But I felt like I couldn't pass up the opportunity to get a Patrick Queen, who is a bit controversial, not exactly a universally loved player. Patrick Queen struggled before Roquan Smith was put right next to him. Then he really, really excelled. Now he's going to Pittsburgh for pretty big money. So Patrick Queen was who I ended up with.
All right. Yeah, this one was tough for me because I love Justin Fields. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a solid argument to be made for Justin Fields in this situation. But if you already if you're not taking him to start because you already have Gardner Minshew, I just think Patrick Queen is a much more high impact player. And so I ended up at the same place you did. I think it hurt me more to leave him off than it hurt you. But that's where we ended up.
You throw me a no-brainer for you, Shane.
Okay. I think, I'll give you this one. Another no-brainer to me is T. Higgins from the Bengals. If we want to continue to stick with divisions here, T. Higgins, obviously the Bengals didn't protect him. They've got so many other people that they had to protect. They've got Burrow. They've got, who else did we protect? Amarius Mims, Jamar Chase, Orlando Brown. And so T. Higgins is a slam dunk here. I think he comes in and he's your wide receiver one. Now, is he really a full-on wide receiver one? Maybe not, but he's the closest. Well, maybe not the closest thing, but he's as sure a thing as you're going to get in this draft. And so if you can go get T. Higgins. Now, obviously, he's on the last year of a contract, which we're not considering too much for this exercise, but it's something the expansion team would think about. But T. Higgins, I think you take that all day as your wide receiver one for Gardner Minshew.
Yeah, and I almost think the receivers I was looking at, it's almost going to be like a wide receiver one by committee. So he's probably in name the wide receiver one. But yeah, I totally agree. He was a no-brainer for me as well.
All right. So then where's the next spot that you would go to?
If we're doing no-brainers, I'll go to the NFC North. And there's some, you definitely have some other options that you could go with Detroit. You could throw a Jahmyr Gibbs out there. You could throw a Taylor Decker out there. But Frank Ragnow might be the best center in the NFL. So it feels like let's get as many players at positions that you could say that they're a top 5 in. Like you have Kelsey in there. There's not a lot of guys that you're going to be able to take to this roster who are top 5 at their position. Frank Ragnow is definitely one.
Yeah, this one. And there were so many good players from Detroit as well. Like as I started to piece through this exercise, and Taylor Decker is there, and you mentioned Jahmyr Gibbs, and that you could have gone like with a couple different offensive linemen, running back like you talked about. But Frank Ragnow, there's a scarcity of that position, I think, in this draft, and so that makes that one a surefire thing for me. So we'll go Frank Ragnow. Okay, so as I look through it, I'm going to throw out another name to you. This is a guy that you know that I love. He's got to be on our team, especially considering the roster we're coming from. But I'm going to go to the NFC West and make our first selection from there. And I'm going to take Cam Curl to go be our first safety. I got to get me a Cam Curl on the team. I love Cam Curl. Obviously, they have Tre'Davious White, who was unprotected, but he's older, coming off of injury, maybe on decline. And then you're really looking at rookies and Braden Fisk or Cameron Kinchins, or you're looking at offensive line and Rob Havenstein and Steve Avila. And we've already mentioned offensive line is pretty loaded. So I love me some Cam Curl. I think safety is a little scarce in this draft. So I think that's a really good building block for the secondary.
Yeah, I went with Cam Curl as well. I had 4 offensive linemen written down. I had Braden Fisk written down, Tre'Davious White, Cam Kinchins. But yeah, I went with Cam Curl almost as a favor to Shane. That's my, you got to know your assistant general manager. We're our co-GM. You got to know your co-GM. I know he's a Cam Curl guy. Got to get him on the squad.
Yeah. All right. So, like you said, know your co-GM. We can't have problems in the front office. So where's the next spot that you want to go? You gave me my Cam Curl. Let's see if we can continue to meet on middle ground here.
Let's tackle this debate. I'm ready to tackle a debate because I think it's a building block thing. Little inside baseball for the people. We have 3 offensive tackles that are unprotected for mostly age reasons, and they're all elite at their position. And it's Lane Johnson, it's Teron Armstead, and it is Trent Williams. So I think that the big deciding factor becomes who's the most valuable player that's left that's not a tackle on the Eagles, Dolphins, or 49ers. The decision that I came to, and you could make a couple because the Eagles, you have Saquon, you have Landon Dickerson. With the Dolphins, you have a couple options. You have Bradley Chubb. You have Kendall Fuller. But I felt like the best option for what we need from those 3 teams is a little interior pass rush. So I went with Javon Hargrave. I put Javon Hargrave at defensive tackle, and I went Teron Armstead, Lane Johnson. Not to do 3 picks at once, but I feel like it goes together because you want 2 of those 3 tackles.
So you mentioned 2 tackles that you took, Lane Johnson and Teron Armstead. I took neither, actually, and Trent Williams is the one tackle that I took. So here's where I went. So I went for the Eagles. I went Landon Dickerson at offensive guard, and you could convince me that tackle's more important. Lane Johnson's maybe the best right tackle that's played in the last 2 decades. I probably worried too much about the age and things when it comes to constructing an expansion team. So maybe you go Lane Johnson instead of Landon Dickerson and you go somewhere else. And maybe you go with Javon Hargrave. Javon Hargrave's probably the move over Trent Williams, but I also think Bradley Chubb is the move over who was the other type? Teron Armstead.
All right, so I'm down. Let's do this. Let's lock in Lane Johnson and lock in Javon Hargrave. I'm willing. Let's leave Miami up on the board for a little bit.
Okay.
And we can decide Armstead or Chubb, because I also really like Chubb. So there's no problem there. And Chubb also is another guy who can kind of help my pass rushing concerns. So I think Hargrave is actually, when I was initially going through, I was thinking Dre Greenlaw. Do you think Greenlaw is a better player than Hargrave overall?
No, I don't think so. And also, We've already got 2 linebackers. Yeah. So even if I did, I still think you go, because defensive tackle is scarce. Defensive tackle and safety, I felt like, were 2 of the harder positions to fill. So I'll go with that with you. Let's go Javon Hargrave for the 49ers, and we'll put him at defensive tackle. Well, obviously, we'll put him at defensive tackle. We're not going to put him at offensive tackle. And then that knocks the 49ers off. Let me ask you this. Who did you take from the Saints?
I took Chase Young from the Saints.
Okay. So
I was surprised. Chase Young actually graded out way better than I thought on PFF last year. I thought it was this big-time disappointing season. He graded out really well.
So let's do this. So you want Lane Johnson as the right tackle, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll give you that one. So that keeps Landon Dickerson in Philadelphia. So we'll go Lane Johnson, right tackle. So we need one more tackle and we need one more edge rusher. So would you rather have who did you say? Chase Young? Yeah. Would you rather have Chase Young from the Saints and Teron Armstead from the Dolphins? Or would you rather flip it and have Bradley Chubb from the Dolphins and Ryan Ramczyk from the Saints?
I'd go Armstead and Young. I think Armstead's just by far the best player of the 4.
Okay.
Young might be the worst of the 4, but I think the gap is smaller.
Okay, so do we want to go ahead and lock those 2 in?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's lock Armstead and Chase in.
So Chase,
you're actually. I feel like you're actually still higher on Chase Young than I am, anyway.
Yeah, he's just had I feel like he's been injured and obviously on a bad team and all that stuff. But yeah, okay. So Teron Armstead at tackle. Okay, so that gives us 2 edge rushers. That gives us both of our tackles. Let's go for an easy one. We had a tough debate one here. Let's go for an easy one now.
Okay.
Let's go to the Tennessee Titans. It's DeAndre Hopkins, right?
No doubt.
Yeah, no DeAndre doubt. Hopkins is going to be, like you said, wide receiver 2 by committee sort of thing. He's older, he's up there, but Gardner Minshew, he's going to have a lot of fun throwing to T. Higgins, DeAndre Hopkins, and Travis Kelce.
There's a chance DeAndre Hopkins might still just be a top 10 to top 15 receiver, and we don't know it because he's been playing with Ryan Tannehill and Will Levis the past 2 years. And he had some weird times in Arizona there towards the end, but he was still really productive most of the time. So, I think there's a good chance Hopkins is the best receiver on our roster.
Yeah. All right. Let's go to. Let me throw one to you out of left field that I don't think we would take. I don't think we'd lock in this early, but maybe we just should. How about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and kicker Chase McLaughlin?
I'm good with it. I had their punter on the roster potentially, so I'm totally fine with it.
So you're turning down, Chris Godwin, but we've already got a couple receivers. Levante David, but we've already got a couple of linebackers. And then like Rashad White, Bucky Irving, but I think there's better options. I really just don't think there are a lot of good options for the Buccaneers. So I say we go Chase McLaughlin.
So how about this? I'll throw you another punter off the board because it's a team that I actually was shocked at how. Actually, you know what? I'll pull that one back. We're not going to go punter because I think there's a receiver that you had on that's actually interesting that I didn't. So skip over that. Let me go to the defensive line real quick and finish it off potentially. I went with Michael Pierce from the Ravens. I felt like that made a lot of sense to fit him in there with Mack, Hargrave, and Young. I guess the other potential Ravens are Derrick Henry. I'm not going to pick Mark Andrews, but Mark Andrews is an option.
Marlon Humphrey.
He's gotten really old. So I'm usually the one who cares less about age, but corner's like the one position that I get worried about with age.
I mean, he's only 27.
Really? Wow. I thought he was actually way older than that. I feel like he's definitely lost a step though. A little bit from where I feel like a couple of years ago he was a premier guy. The guys that I really got this decided on for me over him, it was Derrick Henry, Justin Tucker, and Marcus Williams. I don't know how good Marcus Williams actually is, or if that's kind of like a Kyle Hamilton Ravens creation. So I think it's really between Henry, Pierce, and Tucker, and we took a kicker.
Yeah. I had Humphrey in, but Pierce is good. Pierce is better probably than the other defensive tackles I had written down. I had Grover Stewart from Indianapolis. I had Malcolm Roach from Detroit or from Denver. I mean, Michael Pierce is probably he's a better player than both of those guys. It just means you don't get Humphrey. Let's do it. Let's do Michael Pierce.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah. Let me turn it over to you for one. What's one that you're looking at that you're passionate about left on the board?
Denzel Ward from the Browns.
Absolutely.
He's
our CB1.
They tried to tempt the expansion team to take that Deshaun Watson contract off their hands, but we're too smart for that. We're not going to fight. But Denzel Ward, man, that's a good corner one, especially for an expansion roster. So I'm fully there with that one.
I'll tell you what, I had a quarterback written down for my Browns options, but it wasn't Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
It was Jameis. There was part of me that wanted to make a Jameis argument, but Denzel Ward is too good at a position that it's not the toughest to fill because we have options at corner, but it's tough with top-notch talent. And Denzel Ward, I don't know if how many corners are better than Denzel Ward in the NFL? 20-ish? He's probably in that like top 25, 30 range.
I would say he's probably a top 20 corner, 25. Yeah, he's definitely a CB1.
Yeah, I agree. So I feel really good about that. Let's stay in the secondary. I think we agree on this. I just didn't know which one to pick, so I'm going to let you pick it. I wrote Teron Johnson / Rasul Douglas in the secondary. One of the Bills. I think their best options are in the secondary. I mean, I passed over Matt Milano at linebacker, but we have two of them. I passed over a couple offensive linemen, but I think Teron Johnson and Rasul Douglas are our best option.
Matt Milano is actually who I had down.
Oh, I thought you had a corner in. Okay.
Yeah. Matt Milano is actually who I picked from the Bills, but I had Marlon Humphrey, so I am going to need a third cornerback. Actually, before we tackle that though, let's go to the Jets.
Yeah,
Michael Carter.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so Michael Carter is our CB2, and then we are going to have to find, at least from my roster, I'm going to have to find a third corner. So I'm open to that being one of the Bills' corners.
Let's leave that open, though. Let's leave that open for now. Because for that third linebacker spot, I had Edgerrin Cooper from Green Bay. Green Bay was actually, let's actually just kind of break it down by team a little bit with some of these. Green Bay, the guys I had for Green Bay were Lucas Van Ness, who I know you're not a big fan of, Quay Walker, who solid linebacker, but I'd almost rather take the swing with Edgerrin Cooper because we have two solid linebackers. I almost am interested in taking the upside shot at the rookie linebacker for the third spot. But I think it really comes down to Josh Jacobs or Edgerrin Cooper.
Josh Jacobs is where I went.
Yeah, he had a rough year last year, but I would definitely, you know what? Let's put Josh Jacobs in as our second running back because I think he's our backup running back.
Okay. Is Aaron Jones the starter?
I think you got to go Bijan Robinson. So this is what it came down to. Yeah. When we initially went back and forth on it, you had Aaron Jones and
Kyle Pitts,
and I had Bijan and Hawkinson. And I feel like, especially because we have Kelsey, Hawkinson adds a little bit more blocking than a Kyle Pitts would. So and the only reason I'm not even the biggest Hawkinson guy it really is just the Vikings have two options. Like you're picking Aaron Jones or you're picking TJ Hawkinson. And I think Bijan gives you so much. I did not realize, and this is on me, I did not realize how good Bijan Robinson was last year while the season was happening. I know that there was a couple games that he basically got totally put on ice, but per time, I mean, he averaged 4.6 yards per carry. He had 58 catches. His rushing over expected was like top 5 in the league. The smarter people than me are out there saying he should be the second running back taken in fantasy drafts this year. I think Bijan is really. I wasn't as high on Bijan as consensus was in the draft. People looked at him as a generational prospect. I thought he was just a classically very good to great running back prospect. I think some people look at that and they're like, "Ooh, maybe I was wrong to call him generational." I'm actually having the opposite. I look at what he did in that offense with Desmond Ridder, and I'm thinking, you know what? Maybe I was too low on him because I think he's going to have a huge year.
Yeah, I'll go with you on that. So we put Bijan Robinson in as our running back. That gives TJ Hawkinson as our tight end. So we have left to fill out backup quarterback, 2 receivers, 2 offensive guards, and a backup lineman. And then our third linebacker, third corner, second safety, a punter, a defensive back, and a defensive lineman. How do you feel about Christian Kirk from the Jags being a wide receiver for? I don't think the Jags have a lot of good options. Like if you look at their roster, you got Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram, and tight end is full, and those are the only guys I actually wrote down. So I think Christian Kirk, unless you were going to use your punter spot on the Jags, but I think Christian Kirk's a good wide receiver 3-4 type guy.
He wasn't on my initial team, and when you sent me the list, I was like, I don't know how I missed Christian Kirk. Because I didn't even write him down on my list, but he's better than any of the names I had. I had a kicker or a punter in for Jacksonville because I was pretty low on their situation. I considered Andre Cisco, but it's not great.
Yeah. Okay. What about our other safety spot? Do you have anybody in mind for the other safety spot?
So I don't think we're going to go with the safety I went with. If I had to guess, I had Malik Hooker in there, which probably isn't the best use of the Cowboys because Zach Martin's a better player. DeMarcus Lawrence is a better player, but we don't have a spot for Lawrence. It just broke when I did the interior alignment. I didn't have a spot for Zach Martin, but I'm fine going Zach Martin.
So I think Zach Martin is probably the guard for us from the Cowboys. How do you feel about Julian Love from the Seahawks as our other safety?
You don't got to tell me. I mean, you're asking me do I want a Notre Dame player on my team? So yeah, I mean the answer is yes, of course.
I thought I might get you with that one. So let's plug in Julian Love from the Seahawks.
We just went back to back Irishmen. I'm always down for that. You can throw Zach Martin in there on the interior line as well. I actually had let me check to make sure I had Bouye Mafe initially when I did Seattle's, but obviously we have 2 edge rushers, so he doesn't fit. So I had to replace him elsewhere anyway.
Okay, so
the other 2 interior O linemen I had, by the way, for that 4th guard spot, if you wanted to pick between these 2 potentially, I had Robert Hunt from Carolina, probably a bad contract. I don't think we're too worried about that. We're not paying a quarterback big bucks, so we're getting out easy a little bit with that. Or Quentin Nelson from Indianapolis.
Yeah, I think we go Quentin Nelson.
Another Irishman. I mean, this is just Notre Dame Midwest. I guess Notre Dame already is in the Midwest, but.
And then for the Panthers, what about Taylor Moton as just our backup offensive lineman?
That works for me.
Because the other options with Carolina, they're another team that doesn't have a lot. You've got JT Sanders and Jonathan Brooks, and those are all filled for us. You could go Shaq Thompson for your third linebacker, but I think Taylor Moton would be more valuable as a backup tackle than Shaq Thompson would be as a third linebacker.
I agree. I went the people I wrote down were Jatavion Sanders, Robert Hunt, and Johnny Hecker. So.
Oh yeah. Oh, Johnny Hecker could be in play at punter.
Yeah, we'll leave it out. We'll leave it out there in case we can't find one. But yeah, I think it's probably the right move.
Okay. So that leaves us a quarterback and a wide receiver on offense, and then a linebacker, a corner, a DB, a defensive lineman, and a punter on defense. I don't know why I concluded kicker and punter on defense, but
I think we probably just go quarterback right now on the second quarterback slot because Bills don't really have a backup. We don't want Mariota. Bears have Badgett as the backup.
Yeah.
Texans don't. I don't.
It's got to be Jacoby, right?
Yeah, it's Jacoby Brissett.
Yeah.
I'm trying to go through the other quarterbacks available just to even see if I'm missing someone. Davis Mills probably still in Houston. I think he's the backup. Zach Wilson. I don't think we want Zach Wilson from Denver. Yeah, it's Jacoby Brissett. And by the way, there's people out there. I know Greg Rosenthal from the Around the NFL podcast. He thinks Jacoby Brissett's like the 16th or 17th best quarterback in football. He thinks that he actually had a better year than Baker Mayfield. I think he said if you watch the tape, Jacoby Brissett was more impressive on tape than Baker was last year. And if you put Brissett in Tampa's offense, they would have been better. I don't know if I'm going that far, but I think Brissett is very competent.
Yeah. Okay.
Hold on to the ball a lot, but we have a good O-line.
We do. Yeah, really good O-line. I mean, you could do a lot of things with Bijan Robinson behind Terran Armstead, Zach Martin, Frank Ragnow, Quentin Nelson, and Lane Johnson. Like, this team's winning the Super Bowl, I feel like, to be honest. This team is ridiculous. Next year, we're definitely going to have to add some more protections. But for that last wide receiver spot, how do you feel about Keenan Allen from Chicago?
That's where I went. And I don't think people realize Keenan Allen had arguably the best season of his career last year. And they asked Keenan Allen, why didn't he want to work with the Chargers on restructuring his contract? He said, I had 108 catches for 1,243 yards and 7 touchdowns. Why am I sacrificing money? And he's absolutely right, because you could make another argument. Keenan Allen's the best receiver on this roster, and he's still a top 15 receiver who we're disrespecting. So I was a little bit worried about the receivers when we went through our protections. I think we ended up with an incredible receiver room here.
Yeah, absolutely. T. Higgins, DeAndre Hopkins, Christian Kirk, Keenan Allen. That's nasty.
Yeah.
Okay, so we need a linebacker, a corner, a defensive back, a defensive lineman, and a punter from Buffalo, Houston, Denver, Arizona, and Washington.
Washington does not have a lot to be interested in. So I went with Emmanuel Forbes as the extra DB. I know Shane hates Emmanuel Forbes, but at least it's like an upside swing for a depth corner. Maybe he fills out a little bit, or maybe he just grows into his role. Maybe he's a slot corner at the next level. So Emmanuel Forbes did not have a great rookie year whatsoever. But I think we just have to store him away, kind of.
Yeah, I think that's the right move because, like you said, there's not a lot there to choose from in Washington, but he was a first-round pick a year ago, and I didn't have him graded as a first-round pick, but I had him as a high second-round pick, and so he's a guy that had a rough rookie year. I think that he's a guy that you definitely take in this situation. So where are we going to go for our other cornerback spot? Who you mentioned a couple guys from Buffalo. Who did you mention again?
I mentioned Teron Johnson and Rasul Douglas, whoever you preferred out of the two.
Yeah, that one's tough. I was such a big Rasul Douglas fan coming out of the draft, and he was a horrible fit for Philadelphia and what they were trying to do. He's done better. He really kind of turned his career around in Green Bay, and of course now he's in Buffalo. Rasul's 28.
I think that sounds right.
Looks like he turns 29 basically around the start of the season. Taron Johnson's about a year younger. I like Rasul better. Let's go Rasul Douglas.
Got the good celebration after big plays. I'm a big Rasul guy. I'm happy with Rasul there. So I guess so. We got 3 spots left with Houston, Denver, and Arizona. We only have linebacker, D-line, and punter to fill. Arizona, I only have a punter of those options. So if we wanted to go with Blake Gillikin, who I don't know who that is, but I'm also not up on the punting game generally, not checking the air yard stats on punters. Yeah,
I don't know who that is either, but that's also who I had because they just don't really have much else.
What if he stinks and then our Oklahoma City fans are like, these guys didn't even value the punter position in the expansion draft?
It's very possible that could happen.
But yeah, so then the other 2 spots, it's linebacker and D-line. You have the Texans and you have the Broncos. If you're the Texans, Christian Harris makes sense at linebacker. Danielle Hunter makes sense at edge. Derek Barnett makes sense at edge, but I'm not going to let Shane draft Derek Barnett. So it's Harris or Hunter. I guess it comes down to Denver then.
Yeah, so I'm going to pull up Denver's depth chart real quick.
Yeah, I'm doing the same.
So I have written down. So they have Zach Allen's technically an edge. He's not technically a linebacker. We could go
Alex Singleton.
Yeah, I hate that.
I guess we could go Malcolm. D-line doesn't have to be an edge.
Oh, that's true. We could go. Let's do that. That's what we want to do. Let's go Malcolm Roach.
Who do we protect for them?
For Denver, we protected Patrick Surtain, Baron Browning, Jonah Ellis, and Nick Benito.
Yeah, I was going to ask if maybe we should keep Jonah Ellis, but I forgot we kept him. Yeah, do Malcolm Roach. Let's go Malcolm Roach on the D-line and Christian Harris at linebacker. That's a roster right there.
Okay, now before we lock this in, let me ask you this. Since we're keeping Malcolm Roach as our backup lineman and he's a defensive tackle, is there a pass rusher we would rather have from either Baltimore or San Fran? I don't think there is.
I guess the argument's Odafe Owe, right?
Yeah, you can make an argument if you took Owe and then you rotate out 31-year-old Michael Pierce, you put Malcolm Roach at D tackle, and then your backup is Odafe Owe, or do we want to leave it as is here?
Let me take a look here. Let me take a look at good old Odafe Owe. He's kind of like generally, wow, he graded out so well. He's like the exact type of edge rusher that I usually underrate because he grades out really well, but he doesn't get a lot of sack production. That's a tough call. Still on a rookie deal. I'm going to leave it up to Shane. I'm going to leave it up to you. I feel good about the rest of our D-line, so I'm going to leave it up to you. You can go Pierce and Roach, or you can go Roach and Owe.
Let's do Owe.
Okay. Yeah, I'm cool with that.
Okay.
We are pretty old.
Yeah.
So Michael Pierce, that's another I guess I don't know. I guess we're not that old. I guess we have a good amount of young. We have a nice mix. We have Bijan in there who's younger. We have Malcolm Roach who's younger. Chase Young, not younger but not older. Queen's a little younger. Harris is younger. Carter's younger. I guess it's not that young. Forbes and Owe. I like that move. That's a good move. That's a good suggestion by my co-GM there.
Let's go. Okay, so as our expansion team roster stands right now, our offense is quarterbacked by Gardner Minshew with backup Jacoby Brissett, running backs Bijan Robinson and Josh Jacobs, a wide receiver core of T. Higgins, DeAndre Hopkins, Christian Kirk, and Keenan Allen, with tight ends Travis Kelce and TJ Hawkinson. On the offensive line, we have Teron Armstead, Zach Martin, Frank Ragnow, Quentin Nelson, Lane Johnson, with backup Taylor Moton. On defense, we've got a defensive line of Khalil Mack, Javon Hargrave, Malcolm Roach, and Chase Young, with Odafe Owe as our backup. We have linebackers Bobby Okereke, Patrick Queen, Christian Harris, Denzel Ward's cornerback. Skip down one too far. Bobby Okereke, Patrick Queen, Christian Harris. And then at cornerback, we have Denzel Ward, Michael Carter, and Rasul Douglas. Safeties Cam Curl and Julian Love, with a backup defensive back, Emmanuel Forbes. And then we've got kicker Chase McLaughlin and punter Blake Gillikin. Mark, this team's ridiculous, right? Like this would definitely be the best team in the NFL. I mean, maybe they don't win the Super Bowl because of Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and, quarterbacks that can just take over a game. But like this would top to bottom be the best roster in the NFL.
Yeah. I think that this team's going deep into the playoffs. I guess if you were to find a weakness, I think if I'm worried about anything, I guess it's the secondary. Just not a lot of elite talent in the secondary. It feels like you have Bijan, you have pretty elite talent out wide. You have Kelce, obviously the O-line's incredible. Mack and Hargrave up front. You feel really good about like two top, 15 linebackers on the team. It's that secondary that's going to make or break the team.
Yeah, secondary, and then ultimately your QB play from Minshew / Brissett. Like, you get into those shootout games in the snow in January. Is the secondary going to be able to get a stop? I think the secondary is good, but doesn't have a Pat Surtain. It doesn't have a lockdown guy. And then is Gardner Minshew going to be able to keep up without making those mistakes? So if I'm looking at, hey, what position is this team going in the first round of the draft? It's either looking at a quarterback or a corner.
Yeah, definitely. And if you're a team going against this team, you don't want to run the ball at all. You just want to make this a 45-38 game. Try to make Minshew and Brissett make mistakes and just throw at our secondary all day long. Not that it's bad, but if you're trying to figure out a way to beat our powerhouse, I think it's get us in a shootout.
But also, you could just run the ball at Javon Hargrave, and we might be susceptible to the run especially with taking out Michael Pierce.
Especially the run stuffer, though, right?
He's fine, but he's
pretty good at linebacker. We're pretty good at linebacker against the run. Okereke, Queen, Harris, they're all pretty good in terms of tackling, at least. And honestly, I think we want teams to run because we want to slow the game down. If we could slow the game down, we feel pretty good.
It's true. It was next level. We're coaching from the GM room, from the GM's office here, taking Michael Pierce out so teams will run at us.
We're in a Sirianni situation. We've got to come up with all the schematics on our end, because then we bring him in and are like, all right, you bozo, here's what you're going to run. We're basically running the Howie Sirianni situation.
All right. Well, this is a fun exercise. This is something I always enjoy doing. What I really should have done, Mark, is I should have tried to go back and find what our team was from last year.
Oh, yeah.
That was a major missed opportunity by me. It would have been really interesting to see how that played. Maybe I'll see if I can find it to tweet out later on.
We did not feel as good about it.
Yeah, we did not, for sure.
I remember we were arguing if they would make the playoffs, and we were like, I think they could get to 9-10 wins. And this team were like, if they don't win the Super Bowl, it's a failure.
Yeah. So what do you take away from this exercise? We went through the rosters. What are some things that just kind of stood out to you that it was like, I didn't really expect that?
My biggest takeaways are it's actually going through the protections. It's 3 teams. 1, Detroit's better than I thought. I thought there's a chance Detroit takes a step back, and last year was a bit of an illusion. They just have so much young talent. When we were going through their options to protect, they have a lot of guys who are top 5, top 10, top 15 at their positions, and they have a lot of guys who are still on a rookie deal or whatever the case may be. Detroit's got a lot of young talent. They're going to be here as a contender for a while. That's kind of a big take of mine. And then the other 2 were actually, I'll stick with one other one. Green Bay, not as much top-end talent on that team as I thought they had. Those are my 2 big takeaways. Because I thought coming into the year, Green Bay was this team I was kind of afraid of for the Eagles, and the Lions weren't a team I'm thinking about. Now I'm looking at it, I probably think the Lions win the division over Green Bay.
All right. While you were talking there, I actually went back and I was able to find last year's.
Oh, wow.
So it looks like there are 3 players that were on last year's team that are on this year's team. Cam Curl is not one of them.
Oh, wow.
So Chase Young was on it last year for Washington.
Okay.
Where's it? Rasul Douglas was on there for Green Bay.
Okay.
And then Lane Johnson for Philadelphia. So Lane Johnson's the only guy that's on there both years from the same team. But here's our actual team from last year. I'll blow this up so you can see it. Read it off here for those listening. So we had quarterback Jared Goff, which we realized was a mistake before we even got to the show. But running back Ramondre Stevenson, wide receivers Mike Williams, Brandon Cooks, and Tyler Lockett, with tight end Dalton Kincaid. And then our O-line was Bernard Raymond, Will Hernandez, Connor Williams, Austin Corbett, and Lane Johnson. Our O-line is so much better this year.
Yeah.
And then we had backups Trey Lance, Chigi Okonkwo, Tyler Algier, Brian O'Neill, and our kicker was Justin Tucker.
Our running backs stunk.
Yeah. And then on defense, Chase Young and Alex Highsmith as edges. Interior defensive linemen Dalvin Tomlinson and Kalijah Cansey, with linebackers TJ Edwards and Devin Lloyd. Corners DJ Reed, Rasul Douglas, Cam Taylor Britt. Safeties Justin Reed, Tyron Mathieu, and Marcus Epps. And then our backups were Sheldon Rankins, Deontay Banks, and Cortland Sutton, with punter Ethan Evans.
I count 8 guys who we protected in the process this year who didn't get protected last year. Yeah.
So this year's team definitely far better. And we actually protected more players this year. We had 1 extra protection this year, I think. So next year we'll have to go up to either 9 total or 10 total probably, and make this a little bit worse team, because this team's taken the league by storm.
It's too good. It's too good. We as the NFL wanted to let the expansion team be good. We wanted to help out with the rules, and we
accidentally created a dynasty.
It's by the way, this kind of happened in the NHL. I'm not a big hockey fan, and I don't think Shane is, but I do know a couple years ago when the Vegas Golden Knights were introduced, the expansion draft was so crazy that they went to the Stanley Cup Finals in their first year as an expansion team. I forget how it worked, but I think that they went on to change it so that now if there's another expansion team, they made it way harder on the expansion draft. I guess that I think there was some conspiracy that they wanted a good team in Vegas because it was like a big tourist thing. But yeah, apparently this kind of did happen where if they came up with bad expansion rules and the team immediately went to the finals.
See, we're just out here wargaming this out for the NFL. So if when they decide to add this expansion team, we know you need to allow more protection. So we're taking the hit here live on air so the NFL doesn't have to.
Exactly.
All right. Well, that's going to about wrap it up. Mark, before we get out of here, do you have any final thoughts for the people?
No. This might be my last Chalk Talk as an unmarried man. So we're 2 weekends away. I don't know what my next couple weeks will look like, but if I'm not on Chalk Talk, Shane will hold it down, I'm sure. But yeah, it's weird. Feels like I proposed a while ago, and it's like the wedding will come eventually. Wedding's here now, so
it's here. All right, honeymoon trip after. Where you guys going anywhere?
Yeah. So we were originally supposed to go to Punta Cana. Cana. Our travel agent kind of, wasn't a great situation. We ended up getting more expensive. She got worried about safety. We ended up switching it. We're just going to Disney and Universal. She loves Disney. She loves Florida. So we're going to Orlando for a week, and that'll be fun.
All right. And you're taking the podcasting gear with you, right?
Well, I don't think for the honeymoon. I might get a divorce a couple days later if I ask, hey, we're going to draft the under 25 team.
Yeah. As a guy that's been married for 12 years, I would say my piece of marital advice is don't try to record a podcast on the honeymoon. So, I don't know if we'll be on next week. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to squeeze that in, but we will be back. The feed may go dark for a couple weeks while Mark gets settled into newly married life, but we will be back. So stay tuned. Thank you guys for joining us for episode number 162 of Chalk Talk. If you got marital advice, you can tweet that to Mark at @MarkHenryJr_. Otherwise, if you enjoy what you heard on the show, be sure you smash that subscribe button, turn on notifications so you don't miss our next episode. Maybe we'll get one out next week. It might be a couple weeks. We'll see. But drop us a 5-star rating wherever you stream your podcasts, and we'll let you guys know when we are back on the air. You can follow us on Twitter. I'm at Shane Half NFL. He is at Mark Henry Jr., and we will catch you guys next time.